Hi, friends, and thank you so much for joining us for our very first blind wine tasting event for our wonderful clients at Presilium Private Wealth. We are grateful to be here with all of you tonight. If you were invited to this event, it's because you're incredibly important to us, not just as clients, but as part of our Presilium family. Personally, I'm especially happy to be here with you. As many of you know, I recently had a significant surgery, and I want to thank you for your kindness, encouragement, and support over this past week. My surgery was a complete success, and thanks to the outstanding care I received at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm thrilled to be here just 9 days later, celebrating with all of you. I'm now back in the office full time, and as usual, loving every minute of it. These past few months have reminded me just how much the relationships we have built truly mean. Your support has been a source of strength and comfort beyond anything I can express in words. Thank you. I'm also grateful to be here with you after a remarkably volatile past 6 weeks in the markets. In early April, we experienced a nearly 20% drop in US stocks. And during that time, your Presilium team leaned in. We rebalanced your portfolios. We added to stocks at the temporarily much lower prices. We reached out to you numerous times. We had a plan. And as a result, you have once again had exceptional results. We know how important this work is to you and your family. Thank you for the trust you have placed in us. And thank you as well for the many introductions you've made over the past several weeks. We have had the privilege of meeting and working with those that are most important to you. People who weren't receiving the experience or results they deserved, especially during a time like this. It's been an honor to welcome them as clients. As always, we remain ready to take advantage of whatever the markets and the world bring next. Our entire team is working hard every day to protect and grow what matters most to you. But tonight, we want to take a moment to relax with you and enjoy something special together. So now let's get to the main event. 3 incredible hidden wines and a fantastic guide to lead us through them. Please join me in welcoming my great friend, Brandon from Decision, who is back with us again tonight to lead our special blind tasting. Brandon, we're thrilled to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Nice to see you, Jerry. Nice to see all of you. I'm imagining you, really. I can't see you. But this is always one of my favorite experiences. It's one of my favorite tastings. It's actually a tasting format that I do a lot on my own when I taste for wine enthusiasts. We do all of our ratings blind, and so very similar format to this. Obviously, we can't perfect the environment, and so I'm very aware of that. But we did our best to pack these as discreetly as possible. Do know that if you already somehow reveal these wines to you, I am not going to judge you for doing this. It's also not the easiest thing to open these with a bag around the bag, a bag around the bottle. But do your best to either have someone near you rearrange the wines so you kind of are thrown off by the order. I guess there's a lot of ways that could go, but you can still very much play along. If you try to expertly open these bottles with the bags on, I give you my full congratulations. So I think the best way to do this is for the people who want to really dig in, try to grab 3 glasses, and I'll kind of kill some time with a little bit of more introduction if you need to go away from the screen for a second. Three glasses might be the best way to do this. You can absolutely use one glass, not a big deal. Also, though, we have our tasting sheets that came at the back, on the back of your um, memo from Presilium, and with those storage instructions. If you have that nearby, grab that too with a pen or pencil. I can lead you through this no matter what, but at least being able to write down your thoughts, capture notes, capture observations really helps to kind of understand where we're going to go with this. And also, it helps you kind of remember exactly what you were just thinking, kind of helps you think through each wine. Know that blind wine tasting can be this kind of, I don't know, not necessarily a difficult task, but very much a task that some people are afraid of, especially if you don't have the language necessary for wine. We're not going to use that language though, so don't worry about that. This is not meant to be some sort of experience for only the elite drinkers here, only the elite tasters, the cultured drinkers. This is for everyone. And to be honest, everything that I've seen in the past, it very much is the tasters who might think themselves to be novices to be the ones who really excel at this. Blind wine tasting is all about listening to your senses, so your nose, taste, but it's also trusting your instinct. We have oftentimes we have a really difficult time trusting our own instincts, trusting our first impressions. But when it comes down to it, blind wine tasting is very much that. It is simply listening to yourself, to your body, and just kind of going with the flow. I will, of course, pepper you with a few hints and clues throughout. We are not doing something where it's like this could be anything. I'm going to narrow this down when we get there. So just trust the process too. More than anything, have fun. These are excellent wines. They're phenomenal wines. They're all wines very worthy of your attention. And I think they actually do belong in the kind of highest level of wines around the world. So no matter what, you're getting an education. But if you want to play along, I very much encourage you to do so. Along the way, feel free to use the chat or Q&A function. I will be keeping an eye on it. It is one of my favorite parts to interact with you, so I hope you are ready to do that. Know that every single question here, every single observation is welcome. It is what makes this kind of fun, and guaranteed, if you have something on your mind, someone else in the crowd has something similar on their mind too, if not the same exact thing. So, without further ado, pour a little bit of any of these wines into your glass so we can virtual cheers. Cheers to all of you. Um, this is a lovely one. All right, so what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to go through these wines, and what you're going to do is just give first impressions, first reactions to every single wine. So all three of these wines, what you're mainly doing is seeing where you can connect with these wines. Where is the access point? What is like something that brings up? Sometimes you might smell a wine and be like, you know what? Pinot Noir. That's all I'm saying. That's Pinot Noir. Or you might say Cabernet Sauvignon. So we have these kind of ideas already throughout from all the wines we've tasted in our past. Utilize that before anything else. And these are just first impressions. So you can change it. You can, modify it as we go. But the most important aspect to this beginning is just trying to find maybe like a grounding, like a foundation to work from. So give yourself, it doesn't need to be a monster pour because you'll get 0 to hero real quick if you do that. But try and maneuver through these wines one by one and just quickly say, cool, this is where I think it is. Say incomplete phrases is even better. Incomplete language, like language that just makes sense to you, not language that you're putting out there to be judged by others or anything. That's not happening. It's language that makes sense to you. And so when you smell each wine, when you taste it, when you're looking at it, just give those first impressions. For this wine, immediately when I'm looking at it, I have a wine that's a little bit more translucent in my glass. When I see that, I'm like, cool. If I can kind of see through this wine already, I'm going to guess this is on the lighter end of things. I'm going to guess that this is likely not a Cabernet or Syrah. Those grapes tend to be a little bit darker in color, kind of like purple, black, blue colors. I'm not seeing that, at least right now. So immediately I can be like, cool, I think this wine is going to be on the lighter side. On that point, make sure your bottles, if they are in the order you're going to keep them, make sure they stay where they are. So as you're writing things down, you know exactly which bottle you are referring to. I used to do this all the time in restaurants when I would have to pour maybe three, four, five glasses in front of someone, and this would generally be fancy wine if that's what we were doing. And then people would start playing musical glasses with me, and I'd have to figure out exactly what was going on. Try not to do that to yourself. It is very difficult and it will confuse you. So just try to keep the one on the left is one, in the middle, that's wine two, and on the right, it's wine three. So this first wine, I kind of have good first impressions of it, first instincts. I think I know where I'm going at the very least, and I'll move on to the next wine. Um, know that at least one of your wines probably has a screw cap. Screw caps are not a, at least not anymore, a sign of how much the wine costs, a sign of the quality of the wine. Actually, a lot of great producers, especially even French producers, are now using screw caps because they don't have to deal with cork taint. Cork, obviously a TCA, cork taint can only happen when there's cork involved. And so when they take that process out, when they don't use cork anymore and use a screw cap instead, that can't happen. So they don't lose that money. Because you can send these wines back, and there's a whole kind of fiasco when that starts happening. So a screw cap does not necessarily mean it's lower in quality. It generally just means the producer has an idea in mind to keep that wine a little bit more fresh because it doesn't interact with oxygen at this in the same way. This is my next wine, for instance. I see that's a little bit darker. And in this wine also, if anyone has kind of like paper near them or something that looks more of like a colorless surface, like maybe a blank piece of paper, a tablecloth, something like this, sometimes it's helpful to kind of look over it, put your glass over it, and then you can kind of make out the colors a little bit easier. For instance, in this glass, I kind of see this kind of orangish, maybe even slightly brown, not too brown, but orange brown red vibe to here. And immediately that tells me that maybe there's some age on this wine. There's also a specific place in the world where wines kind of look like this. They have that kind of lighter orangish, kind of blood orangey vibe. And so that's where I'm going immediately with this next wine. With the last wine, I am going to get a color that is the darkest of the three. For me, this is the darkest of the three. And so I'm going to make note of that. I'm going to understand. And by the way, my wife came and rearranged all these, so I don't know which is which. But I see that this is the darkest wine. So for me, I have a good idea already of where I'm going. I saw the first one was a little translucent. The middle one had these kind of like orange, brownish red colors. And then the third one is the darkest. So already, those are my initial impressions. My instinct is already telling me something about each of these wines. That is fantastic because your instinct is allowing you to jump into each wine with some sort of knowledge, at least some sort of comfortability. I remember I did one of these blind tastings live in a architect's office recently, and the first thing each team said, there was like five or six teams, the first thing each team said was, "This is so difficult. Like, why didn't you give us a multiple choice blind tasting sheet? Why are you making us do this? This is impossible." All these things. Meanwhile, I teach freshmen in college. I'm like, that's what you guys sound like. You sound like freshmen in college. Uh, at the end of the experience, though, the end results, there was a three-way tie for first place. That is to say, everyone did way better than they thought they did. So as we go through this, give yourself some points right off the bat. Give yourself a little leeway. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at, and maybe the most important part, and this probably sounds counterintuitive, is to analyze the objective qualities of each wine. If you ever have watched the Somm documentaries, the Somm TV shows, you'll see the kind of master sommeliers taste through these wines. Sometimes they do it pretty quickly, but what they're trying to do is take the psychology out. So do not let your mind interfere when you're blind tasting wine. The worst thing you can do is start kind of like saying things and then suddenly you're in this rabbit hole and suddenly you're sort of divorced from that initial impression and you're going this whole different direction. That's not what you want to do. And one way to prevent yourself from doing that is to stick with the objective things. And so at first you saw me talking a lot about color, and that's what you should be doing too. So on this next round, just simply look at the color if you haven't already. And once you've started analyzing the color, and if you've already started doing that, you are now allowed to smell the wine. Still, we're not tasting the wine yet. And if you're tasting the wine on your own, I mean, this is a tasting, so you're allowed to do whatever the heck you want. But we're not tasting it yet in terms of trying to understand which each wine is, because that taste will very much influence, probably more than anything else, what you think this wine is. Even though that could be the most kind of volatile or variable aspect of the tasting. That's when your mind sinks in. But when we look at the wine, when we analyze the color, and then we start smelling it, we can start understanding a lot about it already and kind of start checking things off the box. So I've already done the color with this one. What I'm trying to do is not only smell, but understand in my mind, do I think this is old world or new world? So New World, you're generally going to have a presence of oak in the way of like vanilla or coconut. Sometimes it has American oak, which is going to smell a little bit like bourbon, that kind of slightly pickled nature. There's a lot of places like in Spain, for instance, that uses a lot of American oak. So if you're finding an overt amount of oak via vanilla or coconut flavors, you want to make note of that because most likely that is New World. In addition to that, if you're finding a wine that feels super fruity, like very exuberant, just jumping out of the glass, that is something to note too because most New World wines tend to be riper. They tend to be, or the tradition for New World is to pick these grapes later in the season, and therefore they're going to have more sugar. They're going to have more actual phenolic ripeness, or like the grape itself is going to be riper, more sugar generally as well. All of those things you can tell in the nose because your nose cannot smell sweetness, but it can smell ripeness. And so make note of that as you go through these. Does one in particular seem very fruity compared to the others? Or do they all taste or smell rather a little bit more earthy, which is a sign of the old world? Old world is going to kind of blend the oak in more or less. This is very reductive, but generally speaking, old world wants to blend that oak in a way where it's a little bit more discreet, a little bit more subtle and nuanced. It might not be the first thing that jumps out. In addition to that, the fruit is sometimes secondary as well, because the old world loves this word called terroir, which is sort of, like the earth showing itself, this unique location of earth kind of pushing itself out of the glass. If that's the sensation you're getting, then that seems to be an old world wine, and you should write that down or keep that in mind. For this wine, I smell immediately like this very kind of berry forward fruit, like this kind of like juicy berry, pure fruit. It's not super, super ripe, but at the same time, it does not feel too earthy. It doesn't feel like the earthiness that I might get from France, where generally speaking, I can almost like taste the dirt from some of those wines. And that's kind of the point. That's what they're trying to make you do. I kind of get a little bit more sunshine on this one. And so for me, I'm checking off the box of this feels like more like a New World wine. So continue to do that throughout. Um, any questions so far? Make them known, please. Even questions you think are not worth asking, they're worth asking. Um, when we do this, not only do we try to kind of like preserve the integrity of ratings for a wine magazine, but we're also understanding ourselves how to not be influenced by a label, how to not be influenced by a specific wine region. Sometimes someone will put down a bottle of Burgundy that costs, all this money, 5,000 or sorry, 500, $1,000, and suddenly the onus is sort of on that bottle to perform very well, but also you might think that like, oh, I should automatically think this tastes good, right? It costs a lot of money. More and more, that's not the case. Burgundy's really expensive. And so sometimes it just the quality to the actual price doesn't make sense. That ratio is off. And so when we blind taste, we start understanding what's really behind or beneath the surface. We start understanding like, oh, wait, No one knows who this wine, where this wine comes from. No one knows this producer, but I just scored blindly a 95 out of 100. Like something is going on here. And that's why we blind taste. And that's why it's worthwhile, especially in this example tonight, because you might find things about these wines that you never knew before. You might have thought that, like, hey, I only drink Italian wines, but tonight I scored French as the highest, and I don't know how that happened. And those are good things to know because we don't always get the chance to taste wine like this without being sort of manipulated by exactly what's in front of us or exactly what we think we like. Perhaps we've been tricked the whole time. On this next wine, what I'm smelling, and also I don't I've never learned well by saying very distinct like, oh, I smell, like violets, or I smell the garden hose. I smell, a very specific apricot that's only found in this one place in the world. That never helps me because I think people could do that forever and keep on pulling up all these descriptors. What I like to smell is just stuff that makes sense to me. And it as minimalist as possible, that is probably the easiest way to do it. This next one smells pretty earthy to me. It by no means is it on that juicy, ripe, extravagant spectrum. This one kind of feels a little bit more reserved, maybe just a touch of funk to it, like some of that barnyard funk. And when I get that funk, I immediately go old world. Like there is almost no chance that when it smells like this in this specific way, maybe like a little bit of that dried leather, maybe a little bit of that, I don't know, like kind of open barnyard that is like really appealing, but on paper it is obviously not. Sometimes people think of it maybe like a little bit of like that mushroom vibe. I cook with a lot of mushrooms, so that can be a really beautiful smell. That's what this smells to me. So immediately, this is Old World. And then the last one, which again was my darkest one, uh, the same thing. And in fact, in this one, the thing that stands out the most to me is this kind of like cigar or tobacco cigar box. That's a very distinct descriptor for a specific place in the world. That doesn't mean it's from there. That just means to me like, okay, I feel like I know where we're going, but the two last that I just tasted are almost definitely old school, at least in my mind. And then I could start looking at my notes, look at the color and whatnot. All right, the time we've been waiting for is the taste. When you taste a wine, give it at least two shots, if not three. So if you're the type of person who just takes a big gulp of wine, kudos to you. But try not to do that in this instance because that first gulp is not going to tell you nearly as much as that second or third. The first gulp might simply tell you like a little bit of information, maybe how big the wine is, how structured it is, all those different things. But what we're really looking for right now is tannin. And tannin is that sensation in your mouth that kind of feels like sandpaper. It can feel like cotton mouth or dry mouth. All of those sensations have a lot to do with tannin. And what tannin is telling you is essentially like where does this wine sort of rate in terms of heavy, medium, or low? And when you start kind of connecting the pieces there, this is like one of the main pieces of understanding, at least fairly objectively, right? Because you're not really talking about flavors, you're just talking about tannin or structure. This piece really helps you start placing exactly where this wine might belong with all the other notes you're picking up. All right. So tannin, if tannin is ripping, like you take a sip and you're like, whoa, I need cheese, I need meat, I need food, that's high tannin. And sometimes you can feel that after you take a sip and like it's either on the roof of your mouth or it's on your tongue. It kind of feels like this like really grippy sensation. That's going to be high tannin. Medium tannin is obviously in between, and then the low tannin is something that feels like, I don't know, I could probably drink this red wine on its own and be just fine, and it's very enjoyable. That's going to be on that lower side. As we get into these countries, I'll tell you who kind of has the highest tannins often and who has maybe lower tannins, but it also again tells you something about maybe what that grape might be. For me, this is a pretty low tannin wine. This is also my lightest wine. So I kind of like already have an idea of like where I really want to go with this wine. Everything's kind of starting to pull together. That doesn't mean I'm right. That doesn't mean that some other like tertiary characteristic might be not like showing itself, but I have a pretty good idea of where I'm going, and I've barely even kind of messed with this wine. And that's sort of the point of blind wine tasting. That's the fun of it. You can treat it as if it's a sort of like jigsaw puzzle, trying to understand or kind of uncover, unlayer things one by one. And by doing that as well, you kind of make this process a sensible process. It's very easy to watch some of these pros go at it and be like, how did you do that? Like, in what world did you understand what the vintage was, what the vineyard was, what the producer was, what the grape was? Like, all of that at once. Well, they just do what we're doing fast. And they can do it fast because they have muscle memory in terms of tasting, and they can kind of like put things in their own categories pretty quickly. When I was at the restaurant, when I was in the restaurant world, in 2016, my mentor won the world's best sommelier competition. And when we were trying to prepare for that, I would prepare with him every night we were on the floor by blind tasting and going through these things and watching how he was able to like, it was just this kind of like savant thing that he would just check off all these boxes, and he'd generally have to talk out loud to himself. But as he did that, you could see how quickly he was just moving things to the side and really trying to home in on what was most important. By the way, does anyone think they have a good grip so far on their lineup? I'm really interested in that. Like, is anyone thinking that like, yep, I kind of figuring this out so far. I'm about to tell you where all these wines can be from, so this is probably going to help you a lot. But I'm really intrigued. If you are already feeling that you kind of have this in the bag, I'd love to hear. Just, I mean, you don't have to say it in front of everyone, but I want to know if you're already following along pretty well. So as I said before, I am not by any means trying to trick anyone in this, so there's no curveballs here. These are all from places that we've probably tasted before or come across in one way or another. I'm going to go through those places, but make sure you have your notes nearby because this section will likely help you. I see all these raised hands, so I'm feeling like we've got some people on board. So this section that we're about to go into, pay attention. I will try to give you as many hints without giving it away, but we are about to kind of narrow it down to the three different places these wines can come from. So the first place, or at least one of the places where this wine can come from, is Italy. And that might make sense to some of you if you've tasted a lot of Italian wines, if you kind of know what to look for. The problem with Italy is that this doesn't help you that much in the sense that there are so many places this could be from in Italy. So getting to the point, matching, just a wine with Italy is actually a pretty awesome thing to be able to do. And I hope some of you will be able to do that by the end. But Italy is so rich and so diverse that it could be from a lot of places. The thing though with Italian wine is remember, this is always one of the best examples of a tannin by and large. Like if we're talking about the most prestigious places in Italy, let's say we're talking about wines like Brunello di Montalcino, Super Tuscan, Barolo Barbaresco. There's a lot more. We're talking tannin. So if you're tasting a wine and you feel that grippy sensation and you see a little bit of that kind of like barnyardy funk, both of those things might push you to Italy. In addition to that, one massive aspect of Italian wine is that it kind of smells dried out in its fruit. And what I mean by that is if you leave fruit like an apple and you watch it kind of dry out and you kind of like smell it after, or even if you taste it after, it is different once the oxygen interacts with the fruit, right? And a lot of things do that. So Italian wine especially has a tendency, especially because how they make the wine, a tendency to be rather oxidized. That is to say, it is not generally fresh or pristine or pure in terms of its fruit. In fact, a lot of people like Italian wine because it has this kind of rustic, charming, charismatic personality. It has this kind of unique identity that not a lot of places in the world can emulate. So if you smell that wine that is a little bit dried out and oxidized, that might be a telltale sign that this is an Italian wine in front of you. In addition to that, because of this oxidized nature, the color is oftentimes a little bit oxidized itself. That is to say, it has a little bit of those kind of red, orange, brownish hues if you're looking over it over a blank piece of paper like a white tablecloth. And so as you kind of understand which wine might be closest to that, you then want to see like, okay, maybe this is my Italian wine. And of course, if this is your Italian wine, you probably shouldn't be smelling too much vanilla, too much coconut, too much oak. That's not really what they're going for here. If this is my Italian wine, where am I going? Italy, as I just said, is so diverse. So like what part of it? Am I going to the north where the Barolo and Barbaresco exist? Because if I am going there, I understand that mountains are not that far away, and we are pretty north on that map. So that can be a hot area in the summer, but it can be very cold. It can get snow on the ground. So those flavors generally are a little bit more alpine, a little bit eucalyptus, black cherry, kind of maybe a little bit more toward that underripe side of fruit, and not so kind of juicy as you might find all the way in Sicily. Because in Sicily, you have temperatures that are essentially like desert temperatures. Sometimes it can be one of the hottest places in the world. And so when you're in Sicily, you're expecting to, if you're not on the volcano, you're going to be expecting like a big, juicy monster of a wine that's all fruit, that's all ripe, that's all kind of like pure hedonism in a kind of like juicy form. So where do you exist on this map? And maybe you exist in the middle. And in the middle is where a lot of us might be most familiar because it's Brunello and Chianti territory. When we are in the middle, we kind of have the best of both worlds. We don't have quite as much tannin as Barolo because Barolo again is mainly about not necessarily about its fruit. That's kind of in the background, but Barolo and Barbaresco are mainly about those characteristics of the earth, the soil, the tradition of making these wines. But Chianti in Tuscany in the middle, where also Brunello's made, it's kind of in the middle of this. It has the stature, it has the prestige of a place like Barolo Barbaresco. It's not going to be quite as juicy and as massively ripe as a wine in Sicily all the way to the south. So it might have a little bit of delicacy there. It might have a little bit of nuance there. I mean, surely it's made to last a long time. All Brunellos are, a lot of Italian wines are. But where do you exist in Italy if you had to pick north, middle, or south? That would be the question you're asking if you've already kind of found which wine is from Italy. Keep questions coming either way. I obviously can't click on you if you raise your hand. That won't work like this. But if you type them in, I can absolutely look at them. The next country this could be one of these wines is definitely from is France. France, of course, is best known for a few different wines. Obviously, there's no white wines here, so we'll stick to mainly the red areas. That would be Burgundy for sure. And let's just stick to Bordeaux. You can see on this map that Burgundy's higher up than Bordeaux. At least, just kind of looking at it spatially. That generally means that Burgundy is going to have fruit that's a little bit softer. It is not going to have that kind of bombastic profile that Bordeaux has. And you're oftentimes going to find the epitome of what it means to be a mineral, nuanced, delicate wine in Burgundy. So that's going to be a softer iteration, a softer expression, one that might make you try a little bit for those flavors. Like if those flavors aren't popping out of the glass and it feels kind of like a lighter wine, this could be your spot. It could be Burgundy because Burgundy really likes to make you understand these minute differences between soil type, between one vineyard to the next. These very, very small things that a lot of other places don't prioritize. Burgundy loves that. And so if you find one of those wines here, again, that's likely not too influenced by oak, it very well could be this. However, if you think there's a Bordeaux on the table, and I did say that descriptor for me, and it could be different for you, of tobacco or cigar box, Bordeaux is going to have a darker profile because it has generally Cabernet Merlot as the dominant grapes. It also is going to have a little bit more structure because you always have some structure with that, some grip, some heaviness coming with it, even though the heaviness generally kind of finds itself in a really nice way. But this will not be a light wine. It will not be light in color. It should not be the wine that you mark down on your box and be like, yeah, this kind of maybe feels like that purity of fruit that we get from France, but This is definitely not Pinot Noir. This could be the area you're going for. A lot of people tend to say that the either the tobacco or the cigar box tobacco leaf is the telltale sign. It's not true because sometimes Merlot doesn't quite have that as much. And Merlot is a big grape down here. Merlot, by the way, Petrus is made from Merlot, so Merlot is still a very good grape, even though it has not a great reputation. So these are your two main places in France. Difference between France and Italy, primarily, is this idea of dried out fruit. The fruit in Italy is going to be far more noticeably dried out. The color oftentimes is going to be different too, because the ways of making wine here are very different. Whereas when you go to a French cellar, a French winemaker, oftentimes like all the windows are closed. It feels like there's no air that's moving around. It's very stale. Sometimes it makes you sleepy, and you're like, what is going on? Are you afraid of oxygen? And in fact, in Burgundy, they had a lot of problems with prematurely oxidized bottles for some time. And to a certain extent, they seem to like maybe still have those here and there, but not nearly as much. So France is deathly afraid of oxygen, especially in the cellar, or something that could really mess up their wine in the winemaking process. So when you're looking at French wines, they normally have that kind of pure profile. Like the fruit is really kind of solid. It's like a beautiful black or red. And whereas Italy is like, yeah, just open the doors, do whatever you want. Let's make this, let's make the wine make itself. And in by doing that, by allowing a lot of those kind of more wilder possibilities, that wine then becomes a little bit more oxidized and then the color changes. So the color here again is something that could point you to either Italy or France. Is this helpful to anyone so far? And does anyone have their favorites? So good. And sometimes like when we break it down, it's hard to remember like, oh, this wine's just good. So if you're just enjoying the deliciousness, that is no problem either. But we have France and Italy so far. And then the last one is going to be the West Coast of America. Um, West Coast of America can obviously come in two different ways. It can come from California. If it's coming from California, you can basically just boil it down to Pinot Noir or Cabernet. We'll make it easy. California actually is known for so many other grapes, including like beautiful, bold Zinfandel blends, which are some of my favorites as of late because those vineyards are oftentimes 180 plus years old, which is wild to think about. So Zinfandel is having a moment. Everyone drink, he would drink Zinfandel, and I felt like it was like just terrible. Whenever I could sneak a glass of like, yep, gonna try that. Nope, don't want that. Zinfandel for a while had a problem with just being way too overripe. It was like syrupy. And everyone was making it too alcoholic. Like it was just hard to find the personality of that grape. These days, though, look for Old Vine Zinfandel. It is phenomenal. Turley's been making it for a long time, and they've kind of slowly gone back a little bit on like how bold they make that wine, but Ridge makes some beautiful wine as well. But for these purposes, we're going to narrow it down to Pinot Noir and Cabernet because I think that's what you're most familiar with, and so that feels fair to me. If you're in the Pinot Noir world, if you're in the Cabernet world, you're likely probably Sonoma, Napa. Those are going to be really juicy, really forward with their fruit, and really jumping out of the glass. Like this is opulence, this is decadence, more or less. You can find expressions that are not that, but the general conception of these wines is that. So if there's a wine here that's just like, whoa, this is like ready to party and it is sunny outside because it's always sunny in these places, this is where you want to go. In contrast to that, when we go up to Oregon, we're going to find a slightly different beast. We're going to find an area that is more Pinot Noir Syrah, right? So the difference is if you think you're smelling a Syrah, which is a little bit more peppery, it has a little bit more of that kind of like earthy mineral pepperiness to it. Pinot Noir and Syrah for the reds do really well up here. One reason why people think that is that Oregon has a lot to do with Burgundy in a lot of different ways. The way the seasons come and go is pretty similar. Oregon is also gifted with a large amount of volcanic soil that's really good for grapes. Grapes can thrive off of that and do a really good job and like interesting things and kind of really showcase that terroir. Um, but the temperatures are very similar. The summers in Oregon, if you've been there, can be quite hot, can be quite humid as well, but they can also cool off at night. They can also be the opposite of that when it is some of those cooler months. So those grapes get a chance to rest. And so when you're in Oregon, what you're expecting is a less ripe, a less decadent expression than maybe California. You're also higher up on the map. And so just looking at that geography can do a lot for you. Higher up on that map, you're more north, and that simply means that that fruit is not necessarily going to be as bombacious. Um, yeah. Also to look for, just to make a note here, Oregon Chardonnay is having a moment now, and you should be drinking Oregon Chardonnay. It does not cost that much because it's not the grape or the wine that everyone's thinking about when they think about Oregon. I'm trying to change that. Just my own small power as a writer, but Oregon Chardonnay. Keep on the lookout for it. I can of course send recommendations, but it's worth your while because the wines they're making there are pretty wild, and I think that, like when you look at both of them, you'll see like, wow, Oregon makes really great Pinot Noir, Syrah, etc. But wow, do they make really great Chardonnay. It is sort of astonishing. All right, so you have three different places where these wines can be. If you have been taking notes, I would like for you now just to go with your instinct, go with your impressions, go with some of the descriptions I've given you already, some of those hints, and label each wine however you're doing it. If you have the sheet in front of you or if you just have scrap paper, label each wine where you think it's from. Again, it's USA, so West Coast, either California or Oregon. It is Italy or it is France.
Brandon, while we're waiting for those responses, how would you rate yourself at this? How good are you at blind taste testing?
Great question. I would say I'm better than I thought, but I'm always humbled. And one of the great parts about blind tasting is no matter how good you are, it is a humbling thing. It is oftentimes more humbling for the people who've been in the business for a while than it is for the novices. So the novices are the people who don't do this very often. You really have nothing to lose. I, on the other hand, have my whole reputation to lose. Uh, but I've done pretty well in various I don't know, like minor, competitions with other sommeliers. When I taste on my own, when I'm going through ratings and whatnot, I pick up pretty quickly not only the place where it's from, the grape, but oftentimes I get pretty close to the vintage. So not so bad. But it's pressure when you're tasting, especially winemakers love to do this. So if I visit France, or if I visit, California and Santa Barbara, winemakers love to make you blind taste, and you feel like the pressure of that. And doing this under a high intensity situation can be so much harder because like the psychological aspect of that like just magnifies. And you're obviously trying to like show that like you belong with these people. So it's just this total mind thing. But when you're in the comfort of your own home, it's pretty fun, and you can learn a lot about this. Um,
Is
all right,
your mental checklist the grape variety first, and then old world versus new world, then country, then region, or how do you think about it when you taste something for the first time?
almost exactly how we did it tonight, but I tried to make it as simple as possible, like as simple as humanly possible. Generally, it's that old school old world, new world immediately. That's like the first thing that I'm looking for, just so I can kind of feel like I'm comfortable and feel like I'm going in the right direction. Color's the next thing, and so when I'm looking at that color in my mind, I'm just checking off boxes what it is definitely not. And then as I'm smelling it, I'm just trying to get an idea of like how dried out the fruit is. Maybe that could be an indication of age. Maybe it could be an indication of like, wow, that's like really pristine and like fresh. So maybe this is a young wine also, or maybe it's like totally opposite and like I'm getting a lot of this like earthy, mushroomy, whatever. And then I really last as long as humanly possible to until I taste that wine. And so most of the tasters around me are like, "Can we just taste the wine?" I'm like, "No, I'm trying to get this right." Um, Well, we'll give you notes for sure, Christina. If nothing else, I'm happy to give you the notes of what if especially if anyone guessed this right. Um, all right. So, does everyone in the crowd, hopefully, has put down the country or region? Go ahead and put down your grapes there as well. That's the next box. And then we're going to start unraveling these wines. That's going to be the fun part. That's where I'm going to answer a whole bunch of questions. But try to put all of that information in like a one, two, three manner so you kind of understand exactly which bottle you're referring to. So we're trying to nail the grapes. Again, if we are in Italy, those grapes could either be like Nebbiolo. If you're thinking Barolo Barbaresco way up top, that's kind of like where a lot of tannin comes from. If we're thinking we're in the middle in Tuscany, that grape's probably Sangiovese. And if you think you're from Sicily, and that would again be this wine that is pretty massive in terms of its fruit, in terms of its perfume, all of these different things, then you're probably in a world of like Nero d'Avola, something that's a little bit unctuous. But if you think that the middle path is the right way to go, then you're probably going Sangiovese in the middle. In France, you're going Pinot Noir or Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's Burgundy or Bordeaux. We're just saying Cabernet Sauvignon. We're not going to go into the whole blend just to make it easy for you. Of course, there's probably other grapes in there if it's Bordeaux, but just say, Pinot or Cab. And then if we are in the West Coast of the United States, we're either in California, Oregon. Just simply make sure you get that the USA down if whatever bottle you think it is. And you're probably Pinot Noir, Cabernet, or Syrah. So that's light. Syrah would probably be middle, and then Cabernet would be heavy. Think Napa Cab, like just like a big, lavish, decadent wine in front of you. If it's not that, or if you don't recognize it, then just go with what feels instinctually correct. I'm going to start unwrapping my bottles on this side, but make sure you have those final answers down before you do so. I hope there's some surprises as we do this. My favorite part is the surprises, and hopefully you can share those surprises because the surprises are what wine is all about. It's the reason why I'm still in the wine game. Uh, I think wine has the capacity to kind of like have this like shape-shifting ability to be different and better sometimes when you're around the right people, around the right company. It also has this strange way of being in the world when, in New York at least, it's raining, and it's been raining for a little while. Sometimes that like changes the way these wines taste in my mind. I'm a big biodynamic calendar person, which probably sounds a little kooky to some of you, but that's a way that some people decide to farm and plant their grapes and other crops. So some days it's the right day to taste wine, which is a fruit day. Sometimes it's the wrong day, which is a root day. So all these different things can really change a wine and how it's tasting in one moment to the next, which I think is kind of exciting. It is really a living, evolving thing. So I hope you all have the notes that you've taken, at least the people who are following along. We're going to get into these wines too. Did anyone nail it or get pretty close? I imagine there's like a fair amount who got very close to this. Put it in the Q&A. I'll be watching. Um, I see Bill already, and I'm looking at, wow, Bill, is that 3 out of 3? Nice work. Keep them coming. I'm just intrigued to see like how we did here. Um, my lineup, I mean, to be fair, not uh, my lineup is not indicative of everyone else's because I put this tasting together, so I kind of know where I'm going more or less. But let's start with what I guess let's start with the wine that is different from the rest. Oh, John and Sue, we got another 3 for 3. Nice work. We got Liz, who also was surprised that she got one of these right. I actually, Liz, so more and more wines around the world are becoming a little bit more delicate and precise and nuanced. And sometimes you think that a Brunello is going to be a kind of like a behemoth of a wine, and it's simply not that case anymore. The same goes for really everywhere. People are making these wines to drink them earlier, and so you're not necessarily going to find as easy of signs as we used to be able to find. They all started tasting the same to Todd. That is okay. Hopefully they all started tasting the same in a good way, and that's totally fine. Wow, we got some three for three, so we have some real tasters here. Hopefully some of the information leading up to that kind of helped you, but also more than that, whether you got these right or wrong, I'm more intrigued by like what were the surprises for you? Like, did something stand out that you're like, this is way better than I thought it would be. This is way better than it should be. Do any of you have favorites? Put your favorites now that you know what these wines are in the Q&A too, because these are all pretty strong producers across the board. They're relatively indicative of where they come from, and I want to see some of those surprises as well, if anything exceeded expectations. Two for three as far as grape. That's excellent. Two for three is I'd be super happy about that. Um, I'm smelling currently in my glass, and if you want to taste along with me as you're kind of writing these answers, please do so. I'm tasting the Cristom from Oregon Pinot Noir, one of my favorite producers. This is the one that has, yeah, Kathy, I like this wine a lot. This is one of the wines that I think like did a good job of maybe unfairly masking just a little bit where it comes from. It is pretty prototypical Oregon Pinot. But at the same time, like there's a little bit of this old world vibe in this wine that makes it a little difficult. You know, on the nose, you get a little bit of that kind of like that small instance of funk, even though I think it's a pleasing way. You do have a really light wine here in the Criston Pinot Noir. So to me, that tells me immediately this is probably a Pinot Noir-esque wine. So again, that objective skill set really helps me here because this nose is giving me enough. Like there is some really ripe fruit there, but it is slightly covered up by how they're making it. And what they're trying to do is sort of balance out this wine so it's not only the fruit that is taking over the show. The fruit is sort of there, but it's not fully in the front seat, in my opinion. Um, um, I don't know. For 2023 also, this is wildly good. 2023 in my opinion should not drink this well. That's a really new wine. It's hard for me to even believe that they're bottling 2023s. This is a really new wine, but it's already showing off in a really pleasant way. Despite it having a screw cap, I mean, this is a better bottling from them. It's not the top bottling, but it's a good bottling. And so what they're trying to do here is definitely preserve freshness and definitely make a wine that is lovely to drink in its youth. So if they had that cork in there, it might be different. It might not start kind of showing its true colors for a little bit longer. The exchange with oxygen is different. So they are purposely doing this, and more people are messing around with these screw caps, including people from Burgundy. I've had some of my favorite Burgundies be under a screw cap. Um, a lot of people are saying they liked the Brunello, so let's go to the Brunello next. This is from La Serena, a producer that I've really liked, and I think maybe especially they are pretty awesome at making this kind of like pinpointed Brunello that is not too massive, that isn't too kind of alcoholic, that has a really pleasant taste and finish. It's not necessarily a wine where you're like, I have to have food with it, even though you might be able to tell food with this wine is pretty awesome. Um, Cynthia, John got all three. Cindy almost got them all. And they went to Christum and bought all of their wines. I'm glad because at the same time, we were able to source, I think, almost 170 of each of these bottles. That is wild. We cleared out East Coast for sure in this tasting. This is like, this doesn't happen. People are looking at these orders like that, you must have messed up on a number here. And we're like, nope, this is going to be one of the most impressive tastings in the country virtually, and that's what we're doing. And so this just doesn't happen. I just want to make that clear. Like this is really hard to get this much wine to get us all to be drinking these wines at the same time. It's a really lovely thing. The impact of screw caps versus cork. This is Taryn asking this question. Can you like refine that, like impact on the environment, which you might be saying like with cork trees, or impact on the wine ageability? Um, Taste. Cool. So the taste of cork and screw cap. So screw cap, you're going to get a taste far more fresh and mineral. Like it feels like it's almost like a brand new wine in a way where cork will not feel like that. You get a more purity of like the fruit. Like it feels like it's so like fresh and crisp. more so where a cork will kind of like affect that. And already when you're tasting it, the fruit might feel like it's maybe already evolving by the time you kind of open it and get to it. It might already be doing things in that bottle. Where when you have that screw cap, essentially, oxygen is sort of like meeting that wine for the first time. There's a micro oxygenation sort of relationship happening before that, but it's like the first time. And so that wine is doing a lot of different things as you open it, as you swirl it, than a wine that's under cork. Um, White wines tend to do really well under screw cap, so you see a lot more under screw cap. But I think red wines, especially Pinot Noir, are lovely. And this wine can age. Under screw cap, this wine can age 15 years. I have no problem saying that, and no problem doing that myself, putting it in my cellar. I would do that any day of the week. This wine will be very good in 15 years, which is cool. Or the Cristom wine. Um, Wow, that Brunello is so good. That Brunello also has a little bit of that green herbaceous note. I'm not sure if anyone smelled that. There's like these green herbs that are always part of Sangiovese and Tuscany, likely because of the plants that grow there too. And I love those green herbs. One reason why it goes so well with obviously Italian cuisine. Can we find these wines locally, Julio? Um, a lot of them you probably can. That your best bet is to, of course, well, these days, I don't know, probably ChatGPT could probably put these things together with you too. But winesearcher.com is great. It allows you to kind of search for wines in your area based on your zip code. Understanding these, you would simply need to just take a look at the label. So like the Brunello is La Serena, Brunello di Montalcino. So you need all that information and then it can start populating where they're from. I'm pretty sure they are, but in Pennsylvania, you probably need them shipped in because some of those laws are a little bit rigorous. Um, I live in New York, and New York can certainly help you find these. Um, Brunello oftentimes wants to be around 10 years old at its peak, well, starting to find its peak. Not all of us can wait that long though, and I really like how this is tasting already. That's why I entered in the show. It's 2019, so what, that's going on 6 years of age. Really nice to kind of slowly enter that drinking window, but it's only going to get better. And you can just imagine like, decanting this for a few hours when it's maybe a few more years, it would be lovely. But today I'm really impressed by it. And then finally for me, it's the Bordeaux. And I think this Bordeaux I mean, this is a kind of like always my value driven bargain Bordeaux, but in reality, Bordeaux is a bargain place. It's not like Burgundy where it has all these expensive iterations of wines that might not be worth your time or money because everyone wants Burgundy. It's a very small place on the map, but it just doesn't make enough for the world. Bordeaux's the opposite of that. And because Bordeaux makes so much wine, you can often find a lot of it for the right price. I don't suggest most people buying the fanciest of Bordeaux's unless they're collecting them, unless they're specific in their pursuit and they're like, look, I want this for a reason. Look at second wines, look at third wines these days. They're made really, really well. The farming is phenomenal. Oftentimes it's nearly the same grapes, if not the exact same grapes, just different age vines. Look at Bordeaux today. It is a great place to buy wine from. I want to give the mic back to Jerry and make sure he can close it out for us. I want to thank all of you for sticking around. I know we did a different format tonight, but I hope it was meaningful to you. I hope you learned something from it. I hope it was fun. And if nothing else, I hope it was delicious. These are some of my favorite wines, and I love sharing them with you. So I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the invite. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Brandon. That was amazing. As usual, I really learned a lot, and your presentation was excellent. I'm looking forward to hosting my own blind tasting with friends after this experience. Thank you for joining us tonight. We really enjoyed spending this time with you and will continue to remain focused every day on reaching your goals. We love working with you and have an amazing calendar of special client events planned for the rest of this year and hope that you can join us for many of those as well. Good night, everyone. We hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend and look forward to talking with all of you again soon. Thank you.